Thanks for joining us. I'm Phil Cooke, and today I want to talk about something that's rather controversial. In fact, it's one of the biggest responses I've gotten on my blog. When I dealt with this subject, I got pages and pages and pages and pages of comments about this particular issue, which is stop giving advice to people who don't ask for it. Think about that. Stop giving advice to people who don't ask for it. I know. We want to give people advice. We want to encourage people. We want to help people. But I've discovered, and in fact, let me just say that it's taken me most of my life to understand this, but I found out that except in rare, extreme situations, giving people advice when they haven't asked for it simply doesn't work. It may make you come off as arrogant, is snooty, but I don't know what, no matter how noble your intentions are, that may be the key. No matter how noble your intentions are, it still doesn't work. I remember with my kids growing up. I mean, trust me, I do podcasts, I write blogs, I do videos, I teach at conferences all over the world. And so I'm a fount of advice. I'm always thinking about how we can do things better, particularly how creative people can get their life to the next level. I'm always thinking about that stuff. And so I'm happy to offer advice on any number of things. But I remember when my kids were growing up, if they didn't ask for it, if I gave them some advice, more often than not, they were offended by it. They didn't want it. They weren't interested. And they certainly wouldn't pay attention. With my wife, with my friends, with coworkers, I've just discovered over the years that just throwing advice out there isn't necessarily as appreciated as I think it might be. And I thought a lot about it. And so I just wanted to talk to you today because sometimes unsolicited advice sounds judgmental. It sounds judgmental. They weren't expecting it. They weren't thinking about that topic. It may be something you just saw them do that you think you could help them with. But let me tell you why. And I know before you jump on me here, let me tell you why I think giving unsolicited advice is a bad idea. This is what I've learned about giving advice to people who don't ask for it. Number one, if they don't ask, don't give it. It's simple as that. Simple as that. I've just changed my life to if people don't ask for my advice, I don't give it. I mean, if they ask, great. If they ask, they're open. If they ask, they're thinking about it. If they ask, they know they have a problem. But if they're not asking, don't give it. Simple as that. The second thing I've learned is it applies to everything. I mean, short of stopping someone stepping in front of a moving train, this applies to pretty much everything. There are no real places that I would hold back not giving advice, except if it was threatening somebody's life or I could save somebody in that sense, yes, but really, it applies to every situation. And the third thing I've learned is it doesn't mean people are ungrateful. Sometimes I'll give I used to give unsolicited advice and people would snap at me because they didn't see it was a problem. And that's not a teaching moment. That's not a way to have a teaching moment. What I've learned is they're largely embarrassed. Particularly if you bring it up in a group, don't ever do that. I mean, you'll get killed, and probably rightly so. Don't advise somebody in an unsolicited way in a group. It's really embarrassing. But even if it's just you and that other person, it's often embarrassing. And in my experience, people need to see the result of their wrong thinking. Think about that just for a minute. I just have discovered that over the years, when you're offering advice to people who don't ask, it means they don't see it as a problem. It means they're not open to your advice. It means they're not thinking in terms of changing. This is not a teachable moment, as they call it. So I've discovered that they need to go through with that wrong thinking and see the result they come to. And when that happens, then what they learn is much more lasting and makes a longer impression. When they see the result, the end result of that thinking, they will often come back to you and ask questions, ask your advice, and then when you give it, you become more of a mentor, and they're much more open to accepting it. Another thing I've learned is your advice will be far more effective when they see the mistake. That kind of goes into what I just said before about seeing the end result of their wrong thinking, but they need to see the mistake. They need to see that that ad campaign didn't work. They need to see that that was simply a bad edit. They need to see that that was not a good film. Now obviously, you're not going to let things go to an extreme. You're not going to let somebody edit a bad movie if you can help it. But the truth is, on most things, particularly when it comes to personal choices and creative choices in life, give them a chance to do it and let people point out. I mean, so they see the result of the mistake. It's incredibly important. And number 5, it means you don't really abandon anyone. It means you just watch. You track their progress. I think, it's a little more effort on your part, which I think is good because it means you're investing in the creative people you're leading and working with. Watch, track their progress, see how they're doing, and you'll see the moment they suddenly wake up and recognize that this has gone badly. And then they're going to be much more open to having a change there. The impact of your advice, the ultimate impact is really, I've discovered, not just the value of what you're telling them, the value of the knowledge they're learning, the value of the content. It's really the timing. Timing matters. When you're looking, that's why we call it a teachable moment. People need to be in a position to learn from their mistakes. So as a creative leader, I'm really focusing this on people who are working with other creatives, leading other creative people. Don't be that fount of brilliant advice constantly spouting off all day long. People will resent it. They'll get upset. They're not going to take it for how you mean it. You're going to seem arrogant. You're going to seem out of control. And they're even going to pull farther away from you. So the bottom line is, don't give advice unless they ask. Don't give advice unless they ask. It's such a simple truth. It's a simple point, but I absolutely think it's worth making. And I'd love to hear your comments about this. I mean, come over to philcooke.com and talk to me about it, or respond to here, or whatever. I just think that hearing your thoughts is important because I've discovered in my career that I'm willing to wait for someone to see the end result of their mistake before I offer the advice, because that's when they're most likely to take it. That's when they're most likely to learn. You know what? Simple concept, short episode here, but I think it's incredibly important concept. Don't give advice unless people ask for it. I'm Phil Cooke. Love to talk to you about these kind of things. My blog is philcooke.com. Come visit me over there. And I'd love for you to see these, share them with people. When you see something like this or listen, I'd love for you to share it with people that you think could learn. Think in terms of how you could expand these episodes to other people. More creative people need to learn the tools that will take their career from where they are to where they ought to be. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in. And keep watching, because we're going to be talking about some fantastic things in upcoming episodes.